What percentage of current immigrants
Please don't
back?
interrupt me. I'm begging you.
You know how many terrorists have come in through the border and then done a massive plot against us? To my knowledge, zero.
Well, I have a few terrorist attacks that were done by immigrants. 9/11.
You can actually check people at the door.
They were vetted. The Boston Marathon bomber.
After tonight, let's find out where the results are.
Welcome back to Rattlesnake TV, guys. Today we're going to be reviewing a very interesting debate on US immigration, with the prompt specifically being, should the US shut its borders? Now, on one side, we have Ann Coulter and Sohrab Ahmari, and on the other, we've got libertarian Nick Gillespie and Cenk Uygur. Cenk really gets around these days, hard to find a debate that he's not involved in. And this one starts with a tally to see how much of the audience is for and against the motion. And then at the end, we'll see who changed the most people's minds, which is certainly very interesting. So let's get into the first bit, which is Ann Coulter's opening statement, which she really doesn't hold back.
Okay, so let's take a look at the initial polling results, please. Interesting. Should the United States shut its borders? 71% are with Sohrab and Ann for yes. 29% are with Nick and Cenk for no. I guess we should pack it in. Just kidding.
There's a reason millions of people are trying to come to our country. But if they come, we won't be our country anymore. They are leaving their failed cultures. They're coming to a very, very successful culture. What is a culture other than the people who are in it? If just crossing the Rio Grande turns people into freedom-loving Americans, we can stop all wars, just bring the Afghans over, dump them in the Rio Grande, bring the Iraqis over, dump them in the Rio Grande, send them back. No, a culture is the people who live in it. We're more than just a landmass. Or the Indians would have written the Declaration of Independence, built New York City, put a man on the moon. It's like taking a very expensive wine bottle and pouring vinegar into it and then pretending it's the same wine bottle. No, the culture is the people. There are 8 billion people in the world, and most of them would love to come here. 4 billion of them, which is to say more than half, live on less than $10 a day. Are we going to take them all, move them all into the confines, the landmass of our country? Well, no, of course, we're going to have to choose. So how do we choose? I think we should choose people who are better than us, people who are better looking, who are taller, who are smarter. Let's get our average up. And for the first 300 years, which I'll explain in a moment, that's how our country worked. But we can't do that anymore because Teddy Kennedy needed a legacy. He was in his room pouting. He wanted a civil rights bill, too. His brothers both got to have one. Apparently, our entire country is about improving the self-esteem of this one Irish Catholic family. So his prize, his Kennedy family prize, was civil rights for the entire world. Thus, we got the 1965 Civil Rights Act. It sounds like, the belief of some hippie cult. Every poor person in the world has the right to come here, and we have to take care of them. Not only does every poor person get to come, but they get to bring their cousins. In America, your family is your spouse and your kids. This nephew, third cousin, brother-in-law, no, that's third world stuff. This isn't family reunification. We are doing tribal reunification. The difference between pre-1965, post-1965 immigrants is huge. Pre-1970 immigrants were better than us. They were more educated, they were wealthier, they bought more houses. Oh boy, post-1970 immigrants aren't that at all. They are far more likely to be on welfare. There are a lot of ways to fiddle with the numbers, but one of the main ones is counting anchor babies as Americans. Well, okay, most of our welfare is dedicated to poor people with children. So if the illegal runs across the border, 8 months pregnant, drops a baby, and then starts collecting welfare on that anchor baby who's about to bring in her whole village, that can be counted as an American citizen on welfare. So what you want to look at is foreign-born head of family versus native-born, US-born head of family. And when those comparisons are made, the foreign-born head of family, 54% collecting government assistance. US-born head of family, and by the way, that includes all of the immigrants that have come in since the 1965 Civil Rights Act, 34%. Now, the reason for this, and the reason we didn't have to have any rules before, I mean, there was an ethnic preference for the countries that founded and built this country, but you didn't really have to have rules. It was hard to get here. You had to have some stamina to even get here. But moreover, there was no welfare. That is the crucial turning point. It was a double whammy in 1965. We're going to have the Great Society programs, and we're going to open up immigration to the third world. In fact, prefer the third world. Interestingly, pre-1970 immigrants, Ellis Island immigrants, 30% of them went home because they couldn't make it in America. No welfare. If you can't do something, you're gonna starve or you're gonna go home.
So Anne is correct here about immigration. The Immigration Act of 1965 limited the national origins quota. Before this, from 1890 to 1924, immigration was dominated by Southern, Eastern, and Central Europeans from 70 to 80%. And then from 1924 to 1965, it shifted towards Northern and Western Europe, 40 to 50%. This was due to restrictive immigration policies. Post-1965, immigration to the US diversified significantly, with a major shift towards Latin America, especially Mexico and Central America, and also Asia, India, China, etc. Now, do you think that was a wise decision? Or maybe those from Christian European cultures, who America shares a lineage and a history and a religious history with, and who are some of the most peaceful and prosperous countries in the world, should be prioritized. And when you look at crime alone, which is a very prominent theme throughout this debate, if you look at the news and you read the newspapers, you'll struggle to get a proper picture of this, which is why I refer to Ground News, which is my main source for news and information. If you don't know Ground News, it's an independent organization that collects tens of thousands of sources and puts them all in one place, which stops you from having to do all of the hard work and going to all of these different sites. And one of the cool things about Ground News is that you can search basically any topic that you want to get the news on. Here, you can see that I'm going to US immigration. And then you scroll down the list and you can see the blind spot stories, you can see all of the news stories, and right here we've got US prosecutors aim to try Mexican drug lord El Mayo Zambada in New York, then in Texas. And we can see how this is being reported on left, center, and right, and you can even see the factuality. And these are just some of their many great features. And guys, for Rattlesnake TV listeners, Ground News is offering a massive 40% off the Vantage plan. So all you've got to do is go to ground.news/rattlesnake. That's ground.news/rattlesnake, or hit this QR code right here on the screen to start your subscription today and to keep yourself armed and dangerous with a healthy news diet. And don't forget, guys, when you sign up to Ground News using my link, you're not only supporting a great startup, you are supporting the channel directly. So let's get back to the video now, where we'll watch a little bit from Cenk and Nick in their opening statements.
So we've never been comfortable with the people streaming across our borders. It was true in 1902. It's true in 2024. Last year saw what the AP called a record number of illegal crossings into America from Mexico. And that's not even the whole story, since the majority of people in the country illegally don't bum rush their way across the southern border. They come here legally and then don't leave. That's why South Asian Indians are the third largest illegal people who are illegal in America. Is that your vision of an illegal immigrant? But what's strange about these invaders, these people who are rushing into our country and destroying everything, is what do they do when they get here? They break into our country and then they pick our crops, prepare our meals, cut our lawns, clean our toilets, and babysit our children. What strange armies of the night. At the same time that we are creating a panic on the border, and we need to deal with that, we've made it harder and harder for people to immigrate legally. Over 9 million people are waiting to get green cards, and the wait time has skyrocketed over the past few decades from mere months to decades. Immigrants want to come to America now for the same reason they did 100 years ago when my grandparents came here from shithole countries, as Donald Trump talked, from Italy and Ireland. They come here because of American prosperity. And they don't come here to destroy American prosperity. They come here to enjoy it and expand it and make it rich and new again. Contra Donald Trump, illegal immigrants are not bringing drugs or crime. Illegal immigrants commit fewer crimes than native-born Americans. Legal immigrants commit fewer crimes than native-born Americans. Immigrants have a higher labor force participation rate, and they're more likely to start a business than native-born Americans. In fact, immigrants and their children started 45% of today's Fortune 500 companies. They're stealing from us, aren't they? Even anti-immigrant economists like Harvard's George Borjas, himself a refugee from Castro's Cuba, conclude that immigrants on net are a boon because they expand markets and fill labor gaps. The Congressional Budget Office has said that the deficit going forward will be $1 trillion less over the next decade because immigrants have expanded the economy. So what should we do? We should create a system that allows more people to come here legally and enter through the front door.
Guys, we need immigrants. Literally, the entire country, 100% of us are descendants of immigrants. To say that, no, we're not going to do any more immigrants, well, that's preposterous. The only question is, how are we going to do immigration, not whether we're going to do immigration. By the way, if you think it's a great idea to stop anybody else from coming in or going out and close off and let's just stay what we are now, this culture is great. Well, good news for you, the Ming Dynasty agreed almost exactly 500 years ago. That's why they burned all their ships to the ground. It was called the treasure fleet. And the Chinese ships at the time were so dominant. They're about 10 times the size of the European ships. And that's why they were economic giants 500 years ago. And after they burned their ships and didn't have anybody going in or out, a 200-year massive slump. And it destroyed their dynasty. Because closing yourself off from the rest of the world is a recipe for disaster. So let's have a realistic conversation about how do we get people in here and do it the right way. It is a stone-cold fact that native-born citizens, and if you're in that category, sorry, but you are the most likely to be criminals. So undocumented immigrants are only half as likely to commit crime as natural-born Americans. And if you're in my group and Sorab's group of documented immigrants, we're the safest of all. We're a quarter. So that, you know what? That means natural-born Americans are 4 times more likely to commit crime than we are. We're just little teddy bears up here, okay? So crime is not true. By the way, the gangs are coming in. You watch Fox News. They're all gangs, right? MS-13. Well, there's documentation. And the number of people who are coming in who are coming from gangs are 0.09%. So that's a mirage. It's literally not true that they are more criminal than the average American. So how about jobs? They're taking our jobs. Are they? We literally have record low unemployment. And this is not a partisan issue. Both under Trump and Biden, except for COVID, obviously, we had really good low unemployment. And if they took all of our jobs, how come unemployment isn't sky high? We have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the whole world. They're definitely not taking our jobs. And guys, who are you kidding? Did you all just come from a meatpacking plant and they took your jobs? No. Did you all just pick lettuce and then come to the Majestic Theater? No, they're taking the jobs that Americans won't do.
I don't really get how you can say that illegal immigrants commit less crime. First of all, I mean, most of them aren't accounted for. So there's millions and millions of people in the country who have no documentation, who the government aren't even aware of. Moreover, how does it make any logical sense to say that illegal immigrants commit less crimes? Maybe my English isn't so good, but if you are an illegal immigrant who came to the country illegally, then that would make you a criminal, which would make all of them criminals. Someone please explain that logic to me. And in terms of crime statistics, we will get into that after the next segment. And then the argument that we are all immigrants is just such a snooze fest. It's like the colonialism argument. Well, we came and colonized the natives. Well, then the natives were colonizing each other, and it just goes on and on and on. And Anne will touch on that in the next part, but America has a very distinct culture. America is not just some melting pot. America has a very different identity than, say, Pakistan. And there is a reason why America is the greatest superpower to ever exist. And there's also a reason, multiple reasons actually, why it is in such severe decline. But anyways, on to the next part now, which is an important part where they talk about immigration and crime.
And maybe let's start with you, and maybe just as a prompt, Nick accused you of, well, of nativism, but also of nostalgia for an imagined past. You talked about how pre-1970, the people were smarter, maybe they were taller, better looking. Certainly my great-grandparents weren't. So speak to that issue. Are you nostalgic for an imagined past, and obviously pick up on any arguments that the opposing side put out?
Oh, no, it's just simply a fact that pre-1970 immigrants weren't being supported by the welfare state. They went back. And also, I mean,
what percentage
people act,
of current immigrants
please
go
don't
back?
interrupt me. I'm begging you. They act like we're King Canute trying to hold back the tide. No, the 1965 Act was specifically designed to bring in the third world and to stop people coming who had populated this country, who had built this country. Side note, I don't know if it makes you all feel happy to say we're a nation of immigrants and we're all descended of immigrants, fine, but it's not true unless you mean it in the sense that we're all descended from Adam and Eve, so we all came from someplace. You couldn't immigrate here before there was an established society, there was an American established colony, and then it became a country and fought the revolution. And as of 1990, half of Americans still trace their ancestry back to those original Americans. It wasn't America before they got here.
Quick interruption, guys. If you don't mind smashing that like button, if you enjoy these videos, that would be massively helpful for me. And also, if you have not subscribed to the channel, and if you would like to, you're welcome to do so. Back to the video.
Because the fact is 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 5 people on this panel don't trace their heritage back to the revolution or anything like that. So we trace our heritage back, or Barry and I do, to laws that were passed that kept out our ancestors at a particular moment in time. In 1924, it was over. If you were Italian, if you were Jewish, coming from Europe, you weren't coming into the country anymore.
So, Anne, what is your cutoff when you're thinking about an immigrant? Who qualifies?
Look,
and who doesn't?
I don't care if I'm just saying what this business about we're a nation of immigrants and we're all descended from immigrants. I'm just saying it's simply not true. And yes,
No,
it was bad that. It was bad that. It was bad that. It was bad that. FDR turned the shipload of Jews away. Of course it was. Does that mean we have to wreck our country over this? It's also absolutely 100% not true that immigrants commit fewer crimes. This is fiddling with the numbers. There's one famous Cato study where they looked at Texas's prison and they counted immigrants only, or illegal immigrants who had been caught and fingerprinted by the border police, because when they're first putting them in prison, that's the only thing they know. Wait a year, and they find out all those others are also illegals. So they were counting as citizens someone who couldn't already be identified as an illegal. Look at the most wanted lists in places like Los Angeles, well, any hotbed of immigration. Look at one place, I mean, this is why I wrote Adios America, because the government lies to us. They will not tell us. Just give us a breakdown on immigrant, illegal immigrant, citizens or legal immigrant in our prisons, arrested, convicted. They won't tell us that, and I notice my side is the side asking for it.
I want to point out about crime and things like that. First off, even with the recent increases that happened during the pandemic, when immigration stopped in the country, we saw a rise in crime. So you would think illegals not coming into the country and crime rising. That's peculiar, right? And in any case, when I was suggesting that Anne was living in a past, the crime rates in America now are much lower than they were 20, 30 years ago. So to focus on crime when we're talking about immigration seems to me to be a gigantic red herring.
I mean, the argument that crime has gone down in the last 30 years, crime has gone down the last 30 years globally, and so has poverty. And this is because the world is becoming more prosperous. It's a good thing, but in this context, it's not a very good argument. But one thing that hasn't been mentioned, and I'm shocked that it isn't being brought up in this debate, because this alone is enough reason to close the border immediately and declare a national war against this, and that is the number of Americans being killed by fentanyl. Here we can see a chart from the National Institute of Drug Abuse, and we can see that from 1999 until about 2015, it was going up gradually, but nothing too shocking. But then around 2015, the number of deaths from synthetic opioids other than methadone, primarily fentanyl, absolutely skyrockets to the point where in 2022, nearly 80,000 American citizens were killed from these drugs. Now, fentanyl, as we know, is very dangerous. It's more than 50 times more potent than heroin, and it's found everywhere in the States. It's found laced throughout coke and heroin and counterfeit prescription drugs. And when I go to America, sometimes I feel like I should be carrying Narcan with me at all times, which is what counteracts fentanyl overdoses. Because if you even just come into contact with it, it can kill you. And how does it make its way onto American streets? Well, it's manufactured in China, and then Mexican drug cartels smuggle it into America. That's how. And there's a guy named Tommy G who's got a great YouTube channel who did a whole documentary about how it's made and how it gets into America. And it's pretty shocking, so check that out if you guys want to. But I mean, just think about it for a moment. 80,000 of your citizens per year being killed from a substance that is being smuggled in illegally from the open southern border. But relax, guys, it's all good. We can have fajitas and cheap labor. And now, how about we have a look at America's most wanted list? Carillas, Patel, Flores, Castillo. Innocent? This is not Photoshop, guys. Vitel Hom Innocent is actually on America's most wanted list. That is hilarious. Then we got Donald, and then we've got Polamino and Ignatova and Cardenas and Jimenez all sound about as American as apple pie. And of all 10 people, there's only one innocent man on that list. So, I mean, there are so many reasons for Americans to be absolutely gutted by what is happening to their country and the cost that they are paying due to all of this illegal immigration. And also, the people who come to America legally, by the book, are hardworking people and who want to assimilate into American culture. They should be pissed off too. And now on to the next part where they discuss where the immigrants are coming from.
That people are coming through the Darien Gap from all over the world. They're coming from China, they're coming from Russia, they're coming from Syria, they're coming from Egypt, they're coming from Mauritania, they're coming from everywhere. And we don't know who those people are. How much of a concern is that for those of you on the stage? Maybe Cenk, let's start with you.
Zero, none.
Why?
Okay, so let's talk about
you
reality.
hate America.
Yeah,
right?
let's talk about reality.
Because that to me seems like the thing that has radicalized a lot of people on this issue.
Yeah, they're empirically incorrect. So first of all, Fox News will demagogue and go, oh my God, there was a prayer rug. There's a Muslim guy coming. First of all, what does that even mean? So there's a Muslim guy coming in. Why don't you just tell me you're a bigot? Like, I'm not saying you guys, I'm saying Fox News. That doesn't prove a goddamn thing. What does it prove? Oh, there's a prayer rug. And it turns out, of course, it's not. So you know how many terrorists have come in through the border and then done a massive plot against us? To my knowledge, zero. Zero. Okay, do you know how many people have done mass shootings in America? Tons and tons and tons. Are we kidding ourselves? The mass shootings that happen every single day, the massacre after massacre, and yes, that's all of us, the people that live in America.
Security and Sohrab want to jump
Well,
in.
I have a few terrorist attacks that were done by immigrants. 9/11, the Orlando
Did they come
shooting.
across the border?
I
That's
don't.
not true at all.
Go ahead, Ann.
Again, who was talking there? I don't care if they came across the border. San Bernardino. Oh, and by the way, it's hard to figure these things out because one of the San Bernardino terrorists, as well as the Orlando Pulse nightclub terrorist, was born in America. So the media 100% described them as American man, American man. Yes, it's the apple-cheeked boy next door. How did this happen? Homegrown. The Boston bombers. And how did they get in? Family reunification. They had some uncle someplace who had come in. Basically, every terrorist attack you can think of. Oh, the Times Square bomber, the first World Trade Center bombing. All of them, they were illegal immigrants under the Agricultural Adjustment Act in the 1965. immigration law that allowed agricultural workers to stay, and they would just lie. The INS knew that 90% of them were fake and just let them in anyway.
You were talking about national security concerns on the southern border from people pouring in. First off, as Cenk was talking about, the 9/11 bombers, who are front of mind on all of this, got visas and permits. They flew first class. They were not coming across the border. In any case, this is a reason to have an actual working pathway where you can vet people as opposed to have a rush of people who are all coming at the same time and overwhelming any kind of process. If the process starts back in their home countries, you can have a more manageable border and you can actually check people at the door rather than it being like a Who concert or something like
They
that.
were vetted. The Boston Marathon bombers, San Bernardino, Orlando, they were all vetted.
That's
Our
not the
immigration
question
system
in front
said,
of
welcome.
Norm Macdonald had this great tweet, rest in peace.
A Canadian, by the way, I'll point out.
That's right. He said, if a Muslim explodes a dirty bomb that kills 50 million people, what I'd worry about is the backlash that the peaceful Muslims face. And I'm going to make a point similar to that, which is yes, right now we haven't had cases of people coming through the southern border endangering the homeland, but it takes one for it to happen, and then you will see this country impose genuinely unreasonable solutions. In other words, if the security threat that is incipient at the border is not addressed, then you will get the ugly solutions, right? And I don't want the ugly solutions because I don't want,
So Rob is absolutely right there. There will be ugly solutions and ugly problems that come from this. Just look at the UK. That one is getting very ugly. If you don't have an organized immigration system, that's what happens. And just full disclosure, guys, I do not believe this is because of incompetence or this is because they're just too kind. And if you want to check out why this is completely and utterly planned, then look at my podcast that I did with Jay Dyer. I haven't released it on YouTube because it's too spicy, but it's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, reality-based podcasts. Go and check that out, and he lays out the whole plan. But to Cenk's point, I don't recall any mass hysteria about a prayer rug, which kind of just goes to show that the left don't really want to engage this issue in good faith. I think people are more concerned with the violent criminal gangs, the fentanyl coming across the border, the strain it puts on resources, the demographic collapse, and more. That's probably more of a concern than a prayer rug. But moreover, the terrorist attacks are one thing, but how about the things going on every single day? How about all of the violent crime that is happening with these inner city gangs? How about the crimes being committed by people coming from dangerous places that are just not like our cultures, like war-torn, gang-controlled Haiti, for example? And as an outsider, when I go to America, this is very noticeable. And you objectively would not have this problem if you prioritized immigrants from Christian European countries. Call me racist, but I've been around the block, and not all cultures are equal. Now on to the next bit where they nail down their positions on whether or not America should in fact shut its borders.
And I would love for each of you to each take 1 minute. If you're President of the United States, could happen, there might be an open convention, let's see. What would you do? What does a sensible immigration policy actually look like? Because I don't think anyone on this stage would defend what's happening at the southern border right now.
Yeah. So let's get constructive. So I love this question. So number one, I would hire a lot more Border Patrol. Number two, I would hire a lot more asylum judges. And these are relatively easy to do. And we waste so much money in this country. And that's something that all of us want to do. So that would stem some of the tide. But the best way to stem the tide, but you need that. The second part that you need is for us to do a reasonable, sane immigration policy for documented immigrants so we can get all that new blood in. Look, it's easy to look back and say, well, I would have let the Jewish physicists in. I mean, that's a super convenient thing to say. And I would have let Peter Thiel in, and I would have let Elon Musk in, but I wouldn't have let anybody else in. But you don't know who Elon Musk is. You don't know who's going to be amazing, et cetera. So we need, and we do far too little documented immigrants. But by the way, once we increase the size of the documented immigrants, then if you cross the border, after we increase it and we gave you plenty of opportunity to do it the right way, then you're one and done. Then once you cross the border illegally and we catch you, you can never return. So that is a fair trade. And the last thing I would do is a Marshall Plan for Latin America. And the reason that I would do that is not just because it's the moral thing to do, because it's stunningly successful. So when we did it for Germany, Japan, Turkey, and Greece, we turned those, especially Germany and Japan, our greatest enemies into our greatest allies. They became an incredible economic engine that was trading partner for us. The number one reason people are coming is because of economic desperation. The people who used to come here the most were Mexico, Honduras, and Guatemala. But now the huge fluxes of immigrants, in fact, they stayed relatively the same under Trump and Biden. The extra people are largely from Venezuela and Colombia. Is it because they were all of a sudden got a memo in Colombia? Time to replace the whites. Okay, let's go do a replacement theory. No, they were desperate and had to come here because of the situation in Venezuela. So help those countries and then
a Marshall Plan for Latin America, more Border Patrol agents, more asylum judges, a more sensible policy. Nick, 1 minute. What would you do?
Yeah, I mean, the libertarian in me would never forgive myself if I didn't point out the Marshall Plan is one of the most oversold ideas in history. Germany, the German economic miracle took place after the controls put on by the U.S. and the allies on the German economy were lifted off, and Konrad Adenauer, changed things out. Okay.
Our border, what would you do?
Our border, what I would do,
our immigration policy.
Make it easier to come into the country legally, do more of the processing in the home countries, and then you will have people walking through the door showing papers. You can go to a Staples in America and get a TSA pre-check. We can come up with ways of helping to process more people who don't have criminal records, who don't have communicable diseases, or at least none that are worse than whatever the president has, and then bring them here. You forbid them from getting welfare and things like that, and things will thrive. That's what happened in the past, and it would happen again now.
Beautiful. Thank you. Saurabh.
Southern agriculture took much longer to industrialize or mechanize than agriculture in the North. Why was that? Because in the South, for a long time, they could rely on free labor. Likewise, we have the same process going on. Just having a giant output GDP just because we have lots of people, that's not national prosperity, right? We could bring in 100 million people and just give them, agricultural, old school agricultural equipment without machines to do stuff, and that would look like GDP growth. But it's not the kind of labor-saving technology that pushes our economy to the next stage. And as long as we have mass cheap labor, our economy won't go to that next stage. That next industrial revolution, whatever it may be, it's hindered because there's no incentive to use labor-saving technology. So what I would do is I would close off low-wage migration, period. Only skills-based migration. And then I would stop the mockery that we've made of the asylum process, where we treat economic migrants and wink at them and call them asylum seekers. It's violating international law in a way because there's a clear definition of what a refugee really is, and 80% of these people at the very least are not. I've embedded with them, I've traveled with them as a reporter. They are not asylum seekers. The vast majority are properly counted as economic migrants.
Thanks, Saurabh.
For one thing, I totally agree with that, except I say 100% of the asylum seekers are fake, phony frauds. It's also the worst way to get people into our country. So, fantastic, you wrecked your country. Why don't you come here? Great idea. If you come from a stable country, a successful country, you can never get asylum. Because, you had foresight and wisdom and you guys got it all together. No, you're out. Only you who have wrecked your countries, Venezuela, case in point. I kept reading in the New York Times how they're all cheering for Chavez. I know it's now Maduro, his handpicked successor. He promised the poor, I'm going to steal from the rich and give it back to you. And every few years they'd re-elect him, and the New York Times is so excited. Maybe they could finally get communism that works. And they're all waving their red hats, and he tells them to move on to the golf courses. He actually expropriated all of these farms, private farms, golf clubs, and told the poor to move on to the golf clubs. And they're out waving their red hats for Chavez. And now they've wrecked their country, so they want to come here and collect our welfare instead. So no asylum cases. One other point is, look, most of these laws are already on the books. You know, even if you qualify for asylum under the law, you are supposed to be held in detention. You are supposed to be turned away at our border right now if you could possibly become a public charge. No, instead we're handing them free iPhones and here's your free housing. You can't get in if you pass through another country where you could get asylum. I mean, that's another thing about the humanitarian relief. Why do they all have to come here? Can't we help them where they are? Couldn't we help them in a nearby country? All of them have to pass through Mexico to get here, and by law, Mexico takes refugees, so automatically they should be turned away. And a third one, actually, there are many more, but a third one that is obviously being ignored is they have to show that they've had all their vaccinations. Okay, nobody's being stopped. Nobody's being turned away. Not one of these alleged asylees should be getting in at the border. So that goes to what kind of laws you write. You can't write the laws you want because the people enforcing them won't enforcing them. You need a border and a total shutdown on immigration just to get our books in order.
Okay, so a few points here I want to piggyback on. First point being that most people who come to the United States are not proper asylum seekers, they are economic migrants. And they're coming because the American immigration system allows for it. They don't necessarily need to leave their homes, but they want to, and they know that they'll be let in. And this has happened in Europe on a big scale as well. Economic migrants are coming from around the world because European countries, the EU for that matter, are rolling out the red carpet for them. And once again, not a coincidence, not incompetence, not because they're just so compassionate. This is all planned. Once again, check out the podcast I did with Jay Dyer. And the second point there that I wanted to talk about is helping them where they are. The US sends billions and billions of dollars to war efforts when they could be helping and investing in their neighbors. Maybe if they did that and stopped sanctioning them, then they wouldn't be so destitute and so desperate to get to America. But that would require these countries to want to better themselves as well. And they would have to do away with all of the socialism, which they probably won't. So in that case, just seal the border and let them get on with it. And now on to the last part where we will take a brief look at some of the closing statements as well as seeing how the audience scored the debate.
When we talk about culture, what is our culture? Our culture is not some thing that was just created, whether it was in 1770 or 1970. It's an amalgamation of all of us. So, I mean, the easiest place to see it, of course, is in the food, right? So, what's the most American thing? Pepperoni pizza, that's from Italy. Bagel and lox, that's Jewish. Like, we can go on and on and on. We are the world. That's what's great about America. That's what made us stronger, not weaker. And so you think, well, I know, but we don't want to let the poor in. My dad came to this country with literally $1 in his pocket. You don't know who's going to make it. That's what's beautiful about this country. And the people that are coming in, as we've already proven, are not criminals. What they are people who are desperately trying to give their families a better life. You know what that guy's going to do who went through that perilous, perilous journey and risked his life to get here? He's going to work really hard. He came for the hope. He came for his family.
Think about it. Why is it that employer lobbies always favor higher rates of migration and oppose deterrence against illegal migration? And why is it that today, 53%, according to Pew, 3% of Hispanic Americans favor immediate deportation of illegals, and 70% favor tougher restrictions? These people aren't racist. These people aren't nativists. They just understand that the kind of mass migration we have now works for a narrow stratum of society, but impoverishes the people who most actually need help. And the working class of this country has been battered not just by offshoring, which is one form of corporate arbitrage, but mass low-wage migration, which is the other form of corporate arbitrage. You should oppose it and support tonight's motion.
My Italian grandparents had two sons who fought in World War II in Korea and saved our civilization. This is what immigrants do, and they change America. We change in reaction to them. They change us, and it goes on. You know, Cenk mentioned talking about pepperoni pizza. recently, Italian food, after decades as the most popular cuisine in America, was unseated by Mexican food. There is nothing more American than that. And if we shut our borders, then we are shutting down what makes this country great, which is the creative destruction and the constant state of becoming. And we are a beacon to the world because people can come here and they can do what they want as much as possible. The American dream is to come here and make a better life for yourself, your kids, your grandkids.
So here's a thought experiment for you. If it makes no difference what they've done in their own countries in 1,000 years, not establishing a stable government, then why don't we just make every Latin American country an American state? Would that make a difference? Would our country be the same country it is? Because even though immigrants, and I mean both legal and illegal, commit a boatload of crime, and you can look at the prison records, you can look at the immigrant hotspots, you can look at the real statistics, even though they collect a boatload of welfare and commit every terrorist attack, that isn't the main point I'm making. It is about saving our country. Do we remember Mexico throwing back the Nazi war machine? Why, no, they did nothing in World War II. That was the United States of America. It's been the United States of America that has rescued the rest of the world from tsunamis, from earthquakes, from warlords, from starvation, and not by saying, hey, move in. Once this country is gone, and we're heading there fast, it's lights out for the rest of the world. Thank you.
After tonight, let's find out where the results are. I hope I gave you guys enough time to figure it out. Wow, okay. I don't know who you're cheering for. Should the United States shut its borders? We're ending the night with some movement. Nick and Cenk's side, 37% are with you. Anne and Sorab, 63% are with you. So a little bit of movement, but we got to give it to Anne and Sorab in the end for the raw number. So last but not least, it's impossible to have these kinds of conversations. I want to commend everyone on this stage tonight, Ann Coulter, Sorab Ahmari, Nick Gillespie, and Cenk Uygur, for an incredible conversation. Thank you so much, and have a good night.
So there were some very elated audience members there. I mean, yeah, destroy the country some more. And in terms of the scores, the more I see that implemented, the less I trust it. Because if you think about it, people could just come in there with their biases and with the intention to change their vote at the end to make their side look better. But, I mean, Nick was pretty persuasive, I thought, so maybe people just did change their minds. But anyways, election time is around the corner, and this is make or break for the United States. So, going to be an interesting few months ahead. So guys, don't forget to check out Ground News. You can hit this QR code and the links will be below. My links will also be there as well. And if you guys would like to subscribe to the channel, like the video, if you could, that would be amazing. If you'd like to watch another one, right here. Next time, I'm Jake. This is RattlesnakeTV, keeping you armed and dangerous.